Be ready. 15 seconds.
I take your leave, sir, and the indulgence of the House to refer to certain incidents which took place in this House as well as the other House in the course of the last week and which somewhat disturbed the normal serenity of the work of Parliament. Unfortunately, I was not here then, but since my return, I have endeavored to acquaint myself fully with what happened in both the houses of Parliament. Under our constitution, Parliament consists of our two houses, each functioning in the allotted sphere laid down in that constitution. We derive authority from that constitution. Sometimes we refer back to the practice and conventions prevailing in the Houses of Parliament of the United Kingdom and even refer erroneously to an upper house and a lower house. I do not think that is correct, nor is it helpful always to refer back to the procedure of the British Parliament, which has grown up in the course of several hundred years and as a result of conflicts originally with the authority of the king and later between the commons and the lords. We have no such history behind us, though in making our constitution we have profited by the experience of others. Our guide must therefore be our own constitution, which has clearly specified the functions of the House of the People and the Council of States. To call either of these house an upper house or a lower house is not correct. Each house has full authority to regulate its own procedure within the limits of the Constitution. Neither house by itself constitutes Parliament. It is the two houses together that make the Parliament. It is the two houses together that make the Parliament of India. The successful working of our constitution as of any democratic structure demands the closest cooperation between the two houses. They are in fact parts of the same structure, and any lack of that spirit of cooperation and accommodation would lead to difficulties and come in the way of the proper functioning of our constitution. It is therefore particularly to be regretted that any sense of conflict should arise between the two houses. For those who are interested in the success of the great experiment in nation building that we have embarked upon, it is a paramount duty to bring about this close cooperation where each other. There can be no constitutional differences between the two houses as the final authority is the constitution. That constitution treats the two houses equally except in certain financial matters which are to be the sole purview of the house of the people. In regard to what these are, the speaker is the final authority. This position is perfectly clear and cannot be and has not been challenged at any stage. Unfortunately, some words were used by my colleague, the Law Minister, while speaking in the Council of Estates on April 29, which led to a misunderstanding. That misunderstanding could have been easily removed by a direct reference to him. This was not done, and the matter was raised in the House. Further misunderstandings then arose as between the two houses, and questions of privilege were raised, and it was stated that the dignity of this house had been affected. All of us are jealous of maintaining the dignity and authority of this house and of the speaker who represents this house. Indeed, all of us are anxious to maintain the dignity and authority of both houses which constitute parliament. My colleague, the law minister, is as anxious as any of us to maintain that dignity and authority, and it has been a matter of the greatest regret to him that any words of his should have led people to believe otherwise, and further led to certain occurrences in both houses which disturbed for a while the cooperative and friendly atmosphere which must of necessity prevail in both houses of parliament. Owing to some of these occurrences, he was placed in an embarrassing position where to carry out the directions of one house might appear as if he had ignored the directions of the other. In this dilemma, he might have produced an impression of not having shown the usual consideration which is the duty of every member. But that was far from his intention, and he regret it and trust that the House will accept his apology for any mistake which he might have inadvertently committed. So far as the facts are concerned, they are clear, although unfortunately my colleague, the law minister, was not aware of all of them at the time the first reference was made to this matter in the Council of Estates. It is clear and beyond possibility of dispute that the Speaker's authority is final in declaring that a bill is a money bill. When the Speaker gives his certificate to this effect, this cannot be challenged. The Speaker has no obligation to consult anyone in coming to a decision or in giving his certificate, but he has himself decided to ask for the opinion of the law ministry here. The declaration will be immune from any assessment or reassessment in respect of the voluntarily disclosed income. He will also not be liable to any penalty or prosecution in relation to such income. Besides, the declarant has been exempted from wealth tax up to and including the assessment year 1991-92 in respect of assets represented by the income disclosed under the said scheme. The scheme has a restricted operation in the case of persons whose books of account, other documents, money, bullion, jewelry, etc. have been seized as a result of search by the Income Tax Department. Such persons are not entitled to the benefit of the special rates of income tax in respect of the income for the year in which the search is made or any earlier year. They could, however, make a disclosure in respect of the income for these years and pay tax thereon at the normal rates of income tax applicable to the total income or the relevant years.